So we're coming to the final of my sessions, and in some ways this is revisiting some of the stuff that I've already said, particularly about direct-to-fan. I'm sort of preempting some of the stuff that's coming up tomorrow, and I'm sort of going to leave you with a few questions that I think you should be asking, both about your personal businesses and also about the business of the island and of the region. Okay, so your personal business and then the music business of Barbados and the music business of the Caribbean. So I'm going to talk a bit more about direct-to-fan, and I've talked about this before, haven't I? But for me, this still remains the most significant thing that the internet has done to music. The fact that artists now know who their core fan base are, and they can learn about that fan base and sell them stuff directly. And so in the music industry, when we teach about the music industry, like we've been doing for the last day and a half, usually you start with a bit of copyright, and then you talk about record companies and record deals, and then you talk about publishing and agents. And it seems to get quite complicated quite quickly. But at its most basic, the music industry is this simple. Okay, you build a fan base. So you write songs, you perform them, you record them, and through that you excite people and you build a fan base. Once you have that fan base, now you learn about them. Okay, you connect with them online and you try and find out everything you can about your core fans, and then you sell them stuff. And it doesn't matter what you sell them. You sell them whatever they will pay for. If you have fans who will buy beer, sell them beer. Okay? If you have fans who will buy T-shirts, sell them T-shirts. Okay? Your music is what brings people to the table. The music is what excites them. It's the music that makes them want to be part of your party. But it doesn't necessarily what you sell them, because you might have a fan base who won't buy your music. They won't pay for a streaming service where you can earn royalties. They might not even pay to come to your gigs, but what will they pay for? And so almost as an artist looking at your business, as a manager looking at an artist's business, this is now the challenge. How do we build a fan base? How do we learn about that fan base? And then once we've learned about that fan base, what are we going to sell them and how are we going to deliver that? And it's a new way of looking at the industry. Rather than being immediately, oh, I need a label deal, is that, well, do you need a label deal? What you need is a fan base, okay? And then what you need is understanding of that fan base, and then you need a business plan of how you're going to make money out of that fan base. So as I've said before, traditionally artists didn't know who their fans were. Beyond the mosh pit at the gig and the fan letter, they didn't know who their fans were. They relied on business partners to reach their fans. So you had the artist and the fan, and lots of the managers in the UK like to always say that this is the music industry. There are only two absolutely essential elements of the music industry, which is the artist and the fan. Okay? Everybody else is just in between. And so one of the things that the managers in the UK like to say is everyone else is just in between. They don't need to be there. So everyone else in between has to justify why they're there. Okay, and if anybody between the artist and the fan can't justify why they're there, they should get out of the way. And having said that, you do need business partners. I mean, one thing I think somebody said the other day is DIY doesn't actually mean do it yourself. Because realistically, at some point you've got to write some songs and learn how to sing them. And that's the most important thing. So you are going to need business partners. But it used to be that in order for the artist to reach the fan, they needed a label on the content side and a promoter on the live side. But they didn't even know who the fans were. Okay, the labels were using media and retail to reach the fan, and the promoter was using the ticket agent to reach the fan. So there were two layers of hierarchy between the artist and the fan. And actually, media didn't really know who the fans were. Certainly broadcast media didn't. Retailers were really bad at keeping that information beyond the brains of the person behind the till. Ticketing did a really good job of keeping that information, partly because ticketing went into telesales in the 90s, so then they had to start taking names and addresses and phone numbers and credit card information. And by 2005, it turned out that Ticketmaster had the most valuable database in the entire music industry worldwide. Obviously, they didn't know who had been to the gig. They only knew who'd bought the ticket. But still, they knew a lot more than anyone else. And that's why Live Nation bought Ticketmaster. Okay, it wasn't that they needed the ticketing business, it's that they wanted that incredibly valuable data. So what it meant in the olden days was that the artist had content, and they had a performance, and they had potential. And they would come to the industry. And then the industry then had to work out where the fans were, build the channels, get the products to the fans, and monetize that. That has now all changed, because now the artist has a direct connection to the fan, okay, to core fan base, okay, so artists through their social channels, whichever social media are in fashion at the moment, through their website and through their email list, have direct connection to the fan, which fundamentally changes the business. When artists come to the industry now, they have the content, they have the performance, they have the routes to market, and they have the initial fan base in place. Okay, so the artist is doing more work. As a result of that, the label expects the artist to do more work. Partly because the labels are looking to reduce their risk, because recorded music's not as profitable as it used to be, but partly because it used to be that you couldn't expect the artist to do the legwork, because it was impossible, whereas now it isn't. And so most labels now, however much the A&R guy loves your songs and that one gig where they have the night of their lives, someone else in the label is going to immediately say, well, how much have they done? Okay, you know, how many email addresses do they have? Okay, how many Facebook likes do they have? Okay, that's probably a made-up figure. Let's go onto the Facebook profile and see how many conversations are ongoing. When they post something, how many people like it, share it, engage with it? Okay, because it's easy to get likes. It's less easy to engage that audience. So what are the business partners doing? Well, I say you still need business partners. You need business partners to produce the product, both in terms of finance and expertise. Managing a fan base is time consuming, okay? So they provide resource to help you manage that fan base and then grow that fan base. And if you get to the point that you start to get a mainstream audience who don't want to be connected with you directly, then the traditional infrastructure still has an important role to play, because there will always be a level of fans who don't want to talk to you on social media, don't want to have an email relationship. They will want to buy the music from Amazon or Ticketmaster or the local record shop, and at that point the traditional infrastructure remains important. So very quickly, there's going to be more of this tomorrow, so I'll run through this very quickly. But challenge number one for every new artist, well, challenge number one possibly is to write the best songs that have ever been written, or something nearing that. Okay, so write some great songs, get really good at performing them, and you know, maybe put a little bit of effort and maybe a little bit of money to get some great recordings. I'm assuming you've done all of that. From this point onwards, it's all about building fan base. And as I've said before, this is where gigging is crucial. That's where you engage fans. But remember, gigging at the grassroots is a marketing thing. So you need to take those fans with you. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that every single bit between the songs is a horrible sales pitch. Nobody likes that. Artists don't like that. Fans don't like that. It's finding subtle ways to take your fans with you. So rather than saying, follow me on Instagram, it's things like taking a photo of the audience and then saying, oh, I'm just going to put that on Instagram now. And saying things like, oh, that track I've just sung, you can have that as a free download. If you give me an email address through my Music Glue account tonight, you can have that for free. It's finding subtle conversational ways to give people reasons to come and connect with you through your online channels, because then the direct-to-fan commercial relationship can begin. In terms of stats, labels now, when they sign artists, bookers now, when they book bands, they are looking at stats. Now, there's a big debate about which stats are worthwhile and which aren't. You can massage some of these stats. There are companies out there. But things like Twitter followers, likes and engagement on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, I don't know what it's like over here. Certainly in Europe, Snapchat for the youth demographic is completely taking over as the primary social media. YouTube is incredibly important. SoundCloud is incredibly important. Email address is incredibly important. And one thing a lot of artists do is they build big Facebook followings, big Twitter followings, and then the world moves on and suddenly young people aren't using Facebook anymore. So what do you do now? An email address is the thing that you're looking for, so that you can email people directly into their inbox. What is the one thing that Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram all ask for when you sign up? They ask for an email address. So you should have the email addresses too. So give your fans reasons to give you your email address. Now, you're not going to email them every day of the week. Nothing like that. Okay? But every so often, when you've got really important messages, you use email. You'll also get incredibly good analytics from email. If you use something like MailChimp to send out your emails, you have to pay. It's not a free service. But the analytics you get from email are way better than any other analytics. With the CMU Daily, which goes out every day, once it's landed, we know who has opened it. We know what time they opened it. We know which links they clicked on as they were going through. We know that they clicked on one of our training seminars. We now know that they're interested in our training. So we can then follow up with a discount code. And that sort of data you get from emails in a way that you don't get from social or websites. There is one aside to that, which is there is plenty of research to suggest that teenagers are giving up on email. Which is a real pain, because a lot of what we've said about marketing in the last 10 years is get the email address, that's the most important thing. And now teenagers are giving up on email. I think once they go to college and get a job, they'll be forced to use email. The problem there is that means in their minds it will be email is work, messaging app is fun. Okay, so messaging is moving over to Facebook Messenger, to WhatsApp, and to the competing services around the world. So it may be that we're starting to get to the point again where mobile numbers are something it's worth having from your fans. It used to be that we took mobile numbers so we could text them discount codes. We stopped doing that. But on a WhatsApp type service, you communicate not through email address, not through account name, but through mobile number. So it might be that trying to get mobile numbers off people is useful again, although obviously I think people are generally more willing to give you email addresses than they are mobiles, so you have to be very careful when you're collecting that and give reassurances to the people you're collecting them from. But all of that aside, I would still say for the time being, email address is the most important thing that you need, and certainly if your fan base is 25 plus, then email is everything. How do you do that? Well, I mean, the classic cliche way of doing it is you give a track away. I mean, as we shift over to streaming, this might become less effective, but for the last 5 years, this is how everybody has done it. Give me your email address, get a free track. Okay, we say that at the gig, we say it on social media, we PR it out to the music press. Services like Music Glue and Bandcamp can enable you to do the track for email exchange, with no upfront investment. So it's become the classic way to try and get as many email addresses as possible. And I think one of the things I would say is social media is how you will talk to fans on a day-by-day basis, and which social media will depend on the age of your fans and where they live. However, website and email list remain incredibly important. Okay, even if your website is simply some great photos, links to all of your social networks, maybe some SoundCloud embeds, maybe a link to Spotify and Apple Music with a playlist of your music, and then a place where they can give you an email address in return for something, and maybe a print-to-demand T-shirt that they can buy. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be expensive. I'm a big fan of WordPress. You can build great websites for free using WordPress. But that is really important. And then there are services like Bandcamp, Reverb Nation, Music Glue, Pledge Music, which enable you to do direct-to-fan commercial stuff on your website, either for free, they'll take a cut of sales, or there may be a slight setup charge. MailChimp, Constant Contact, there are others, but they're great for email. You have to pay. Well, there are free accounts for very small databases. As your database grows, you'll have to start paying. But all of this is how you build your fan base. And once you've built your fan base, now you need to understand that fan base. You need to know who are they, where do they live. And as your fan base grows, you can split your fan base up into different groups. This is just sort of, textbook marketing. Your fans will be split into devoted fans, committed fans, casual fans, and occasional fans. Devoted fans and committed fans are your core fan base. These are the people you're going to sell to online and direct. Okay, devoted fans are locked to your social networks 24/7. They follow everything you do. They buy everything you put out within their limited financial means, and they are there for constantly. Committed fans are checking in on a very regular basis. They are interested in everything that you do. Casual fans like your music, but that's it. Okay, so a casual fan will like to listen to the music, will like to watch your videos, may come and see you play live, may go on your email list, but they don't want a constant connection with you. And occasional fans are the fans for whom the traditional music industry works. They want a record every 2 years and a gig every 18 months, no more. Okay, and that is what the traditional music industry has provided. And I think there's the missed opportunity. The music industry has treated all fans as if they are occasional fans and completely underserviced core fan base. Now, For big stars, Taylor Swift, Coldplay, whoever, Rihanna, they will have many, many, many more occasional fans than casual fans, than committed fans, than devoted fans. So if you imagine these different categories, they're sort of in a pyramid. For big stars, there'll be lots of occasional, less casual, less committed, less devoted. However, if you talk about how much money they're willing to spend, the pyramid will be the other way around. Okay? Occasional fans are willing to spend this much money. Casual fans this much money. Committed fans this much money. Devoted fans this much money. So traditionally the music industry has gone for occasional fans because there's more of them, but has underserviced the committed fans and the devoted fans who have more money to spend. So it's working out, what will they spend that money on? How do we get that money out of their pockets and into your bank account? It's sort of as simple as that. So it's understanding, who are my fans? It's worth mentioning that most artists will never get a big enough fan base that they have occasional fans. That's one of the reasons why the traditional model didn't work for a lot of artists. Because what labels, certainly major labels, would say is, you need to have 1 million people buying your music to be a success. Most artists will never have 1 million people buying their music to be a success. You don't need 1 million people to buy your music to be a success. Okay? You probably need, if you have 100,000 fans willing to spend about $10 a month with you, that's a good business. So you don't need to have the massive, massive fan base. And realistically, most of you won't. And I think that's where the direct-to-fan thing comes in. Once you've got occasional fans, you need the traditional infrastructure. But for core fan base, you can do more direct. And as I say, for me, this is where there are huge opportunities. In terms of learning about your fans, there are various analytic tools that you can use. I'm not going to talk about those now, but social media analytics. If you have a distributor getting your content into Spotify and Apple, they should be providing you with great analytics. If they're not, you're with the wrong distributor. So when you're picking distributors, say, what analytics do I get? Website analytics, email analytics, all of these different stats. One of the problems the music industry now has is too much data. We're flooded with data from social, from web, from email, from streaming services. Data is only of value if you ask a question. Okay? So whenever you look at data, you have to ask a question. So we put a track on SoundCloud Monday evening, and then we tweeted it later Monday, and then first thing Tuesday. Now let's look at our streaming stats. Did we see a spike? Okay, was there any impact? No, there wasn't. Well, that was a waste of time. Okay, so we shouldn't do that. We need to find a new way of engaging with our fans. We tried it at lunchtime, no impact. We tried it at 6 p.m. Oh wow, something happened. Okay, this is the time of day when we should be putting stuff out. Bearing in mind, time zones. If you've got fan bases in multiple territories, then you need to be doing stuff on the social networks when they're awake. So sometimes you need to do multiple stuff to hit, the American audience and you guys, and then the European audience, and so on. Beyond the analytics, speak to your fans. Starting at gigs, speak to your fans, but then online, through social. Ask them, what are you into? We're thinking about doing a behind-the-scenes video on our album. Is that the sort of thing you guys are interested in? Should we just put it on YouTube, or would you buy a DVD of that? Ask your fans what they want, what they feel. You can do it as, we're going to do t-shirts. Do you want red t-shirts or do you want blue t-shirts? Ask your fans to be involved in that conversation. A, it means it's good market research. B, your fans will feel that they are involved and they will like that. C, some of the fans who picked red, when you do red t-shirts, will probably feel obliged to buy one because they were involved in the decision-making process. More than that, through Pledge Music and Kickstarter type platforms, you can take the orders before you spend any money. Okay, so go to your fans and say, would you be interested in this? They say yes. Say, okay, well, we're setting this up. If you want us to do it, come and commit. Give us your money now. And then we will then make the DVD. We will make the film. We will do the project because you have already committed in advance. And services like Pledge and Kickstarter are really good at helping you with that. But always remember this. I think sometimes in the music industry there's a disconnect between marketing and sales. Okay, marketing, build a fan base and then do nothing with them. Okay, so once you've built a fan base, remember you're in the business to sell them stuff. And I talked yesterday about, I understand that artists sometimes are squeamish about certain words like exploiting and revenue stream and content. I totally get that. Because ultimately it is about writing great songs, great performances. But ultimately, if you want to be full-time in music and you want to reach out around the world, you need to generate generate revenue. So you need to be thinking, how can I sell stuff to my fans, but in a way that they feel they're getting something special, that they feel, wow, I'm happy to give you $10 because I'm getting something that I really like that I wouldn't otherwise have got. Just to wrap up before lunch, 12:30 we're aiming to finish, is that right? Give or take. Okay, well, I now have a group of questions I'm going to leave you with, and you can come back to me on these questions now, or you can take these with you. Obviously, these are in the manual that you're all going to download. Obviously, they're in the slides that you can also download. But these are some questions that I would be asking, first of all, from an artist-centric point of view, although this would also apply to venues, to festivals, and to labels who can also have a direct-to-fan relationship with their audience. So things to think about is which social media is relevant to my fan base, and that will depend on their age, it will depend on where they live. Okay, so certain social media are big with certain demographics. So in the UK, Facebook is 25 plus, but Facebook is by far the biggest. Okay, so you will reach more people on Facebook. Twitter is more opinion formers. Okay, so A&R people are on Twitter, bookers are on Twitter, journalists are on Twitter, DJs are on Twitter. So you use Twitter in order to reach opinion formers. For teenagers, at the moment, it's all about Snapchat. So it's keeping up to date with which social networks are your audience using, and how do you use them. Bearing in mind on social media, it's all about content. Okay, what content will people share? What content will people talk about? There's the often debate about who should do social. Should it be the artists themselves, or can it be the label or a publicist or an agency? I think that that's for the artist to decide. If the artist is good at it and into it, they should do it themselves. If the artist is not going to tweet or Facebook or Instagram for a month, then it's better not to do it at all than it is to do it badly. And I think with some social networks, it's fine for the label or a publicist to do the work, providing you're honest about that and you don't have them pretending to be the artist. Which direct-to-fan channels can you use to sell to your core fan base? Investigate the Music Loos, Bandcamps, Reverb Nations, Pledge Musics of the world, and work out, would these work for me? What would I sell if I was to do this? What data can you get from these channels, and what are you going to do with that data? How can you get fans' email addresses? Okay, what is it that you could do or say to take those email addresses with you? And then what are you going to do with those email addresses? Are you going to email monthly, every other month? What are the emails going to consist of? What's going to be different about the email versus what you're doing on social? I think a lot of people in music one of the things they do, almost they need to learn like us in the media. In the media, we drip feed content. We have slots every day, and we know we have to fill those slots every day. And if we have a really productive day where we write lots of content, we don't put it all out on one day. We save it for the slots later in the week. Sometimes artists, you'll have a great show, you'll take lots of photos, you wham it all up on Instagram, and then all that content's out there. Rather than thinking, no, hang on a second, perhaps we could drip feed this content. We could have photo of the day for the next month. We could have some photos just for people who are on our email list. So when you create content and marketing content, drip feed it and be strategic with what you do with it. Who does the work? And I talked about this yesterday. I mean, one of the biggest challenges, but this is true for every single business, is there's a finite amount of time. And so at the outset, it's like, where should I invest my time? Should you invest your time in a YouTube channel? If you actually want to have a success on YouTube, you need to really manage the channel. You need to make sure that you upload all of your content, you fill the format right, you tick every box for advertising. And YouTube channels only really work if you're publishing new content at least once a month. The really successful YouTubers are publishing daily. Okay, now that's impractical for musicians. But could you be doing monthly stuff? The question is that right for your fan base? If it is, then it's probably something worth considering. But if your fan base aren't on YouTube, then what's the point? What's the point investing the time? Just have your music videos up on YouTube and then focus on something else. And that's the bit. I can't tell you which of those to use. You need to work that out. Which of those channels are right for you and your fan base? And where do you invest your incredibly precious time? Obviously, as things gain momentum and you can get a bit of investment through labels or publishers or getting other people to do some of the work, that's great. That's how businesses grow. They get other people to do some of the work and then they cut them into the action. And then the decision is, well, how much investment do I take? Because every time I cut someone into the action, I'm giving up two things, a bit of control and a bit of the money. But I'm doing that to grow the business. So that's one of the constant dilemmas is, do I take some investment or do I let another company do some work for me, but in doing so, giving up a bit of control, giving up a bit of the money. I think for a lot of artists, actually, they find giving up the control harder than giving up the money. Because a lot of people, you're quite perfectionist about your vision and your music, and that's great, and you should be, but there has to be a bit of give and take once you get other people involved. In terms of this approach of building a direct-to-fan business, once you have business partners willing to work with you, you then need to decide, well, what are the right business partners for you? I think it's interesting with markets like this, where lots of artists are self-releasing, independent, doing more direct-to-fan. In some ways, you're at an advantage, because that is what European artists, who that wasn't traditionally the way they did it, are now moving over to. So there are some advantages being in markets where there is more of a DIY philosophy. Certain genres have always had a more DIY philosophy. The folk genre in Europe has always had a real DIY. Punk always had a real DIY philosophy. But other genres, traditionally, it was like we wait till a label comes along and let them do the work. Well, actually, increasingly, you have to do more of the work yourself, and so for some people, that's an advantage. Once you get into selling direct, if you can do that, it is worth remembering that there are some logistical challenges. Okay, selling T-shirts online is really simple. You can do it on Music Glue, set it up, print on demand, they do all the fulfillment, don't have to worry about it. If you're creating a great little box set with your CD and you've gone and taken lots of photos and maybe you've done a little bit of handmade stuff, bearing in mind someone has to put that in a jiffy bag and mail it. If you're mailing it, how many of those will you be mailing within Barbados? Probably most of them are going outside of Barbados. Well, what are the postal implications of mailing into North America, mailing into Europe? And work out, make sure you don't eat up your profit margin in postal costs, so you need to work all of that out. And then just remember, who is going to do this work? Can I persuade someone else to do this work? So remember the logistical and fulfillment challenges of doing a good direct-to-fan business. Just very finally, one thing we've alluded to yesterday, and one of the purposes of this entire 3 days, is as well as you thinking about your own business, is to have people thinking about the local industry, okay, so the business in the wider sense, both here in Barbados but also in the region. We talked about this yesterday. Remember, any of you who talked about music companies yesterday, you're meant to be giving me at some point today or tomorrow morning a list of all the companies or individuals you are aware of in Barbados doing music business stuff and what they do, so we can try and map and see where there are gaps in the local industry. But in terms of trying to get you guys working together and piggybacking on each other's work, what initiatives could you or the various organizations instigate that would help with that process? Another great thing that the internet has done beyond direct-to-fan, which people very rarely talk about, but I think it's important for artists, is it's a lot easier to access information than it used to be. And sometimes I'll get people ask questions at my seminars and workshops, and actually the answer is Google it. Google's an incredibly powerful beast. And in my office back in London, every day something will come up where we say, well, how would we do, could we print this, how would you, and you just Google it, how do I print this? And somewhere there's probably a web page that will tell you. Actually these days there's usually a YouTube video that will demo it for you. So use that information, but then also share the information. And there's that element of, on one level, okay, we're all competing because we all want to have success. But then on another level, there's been quite a few DIY communities of late where one artist, all the artists work together, they all collaborate, they all put out lots of music where they are on each other's recordings, and then when one of those artists starts to take off, everybody else can move with them because of the collaboration. If you look at the talent on YouTube, it's all about collaboration. How do you build an audience on YouTube? You collaborate with people who already have an audience. So collaboration, creative collaboration, but for marketing reasons, can be a big part of your personal businesses, but also growing the wider community. And so one of the things that we're keen to get out of this and feedback to everybody over the next 24 hours is, what initiatives do you think could help the local community on the island and in the region? What initiatives would you participate in, and who should lead on that? And is it a case of there's some issues that the industry needs to lobby on? Is it that there needs to be a forum where artists can come together and share? Is it simple as a forum where people can go, well, how many CDs should I press? Which distributor do you use? Did you get any royalties from the US? To share that information between you, and then who could lead on all of that? So, I mean, most of this is stating the obvious, but I think it's good conversations for you to have perhaps over lunch, and to feed back to me and crucially to everybody else in the room. That is all I have formally to say. Okay, so there's going to be different voices for the second half of this program. But before we break for lunch, I will take any questions on anything that we've covered in the last day and a half.
So we were talking about to build fan base, you do gigging. But what if your demographic is outside of your country in terms of gigging?
It is a challenge. I was having that conversation with someone yesterday because obviously that's a particular challenge in this region because getting to other places is expensive. Whereas in the UK, I mean, actually traveling around the UK is quite expensive, but it's easier. I think, can you form collaborations with people online? Okay, there are lots of artists who are actually collaborating with artists on the other side of the planet. And then could you piggyback on their audience? And then crucially, that would mean that if you then decided it was worth spending a little bit of money going into the US, say, to play a gig, if you could do that in collaboration with someone who is based there. So it might be things as simple as, if on YouTube you see a producer who's created a track and you're like, do you know what, I could put something on the top of that track and I think it would be really good. It's sending a really polite message and saying, I love your track. I would love to, would you mind if I was to put some tracks on? You can put it on your YouTube channel. I would like to collaborate. And I think those sorts of collaborations might be a way to get into another region. In terms of playing gigs, there's a thing called gig swapping, which has existed in certain genres for a long time, which is, if you're getting 50, 60 people in your local town, is there another town somewhere where a similar artist is getting 50, 60 people, and could you swap gigs? So they support you and then you support them. Again, obviously there's a cost there because you've got to get to the other gig, so it's not necessarily an immediate solution. But it means that you're then playing to 60 people who like your genre of music who you've never played to before. And if a little bit of money comes in on the door, well, you make a bit of money on your gig and they make a bit of money on their gig. So gig swapping is a good thing. And there's a few initiatives. There's one in the UK, which actually is a rip-off of a thing in Brazil called ACCS, which is trying to set up a forum that is all about gig swapping, is formalising that process online. Those are just a few ideas. I don't know if it's any help. This is the final thing I'm formally saying. A quick plug for me. Don't forget, sign up to my daily bulletin, listen to the podcast. This is where you'll find us. I am around till the end of tomorrow, so I'm not going anywhere, so we can carry on with the conversations. But obviously, great stuff coming up this afternoon and tomorrow to continue with what we've been talking about. So I will see you around. Lunch on the terrace again? Yep. Okay, lunch on the terrace. Thank you very much.